Hello! In this episode of Mr. Bob's Builds, I'm finally getting around to putting some paint down on Bill Sykes. I hope you enjoy it. I wondered long and hard about how I'm going to paint this figure, but I kept coming back to the look of Oliver Reed in the 1960s film, and I think that's how I'm going to go. Nice earth tones, plenty of scope for weathering and detailing, and it'll look good in the end. The neckerchief might prove difficult, but I'm sure we can have a go at it anyway. For this figure, I've decided to go with oil paints. Oil paints give a nice background medium for texturing, highlighting and shading, for getting some of the effects that we can see on Bill's coat and waistcoat, for example. I've had a go at sketching out some ideas about my colour scheme, although this may change as the figure progresses. Oil paints vary from fully opaque to really quite transparent. Therefore, the first stage for me was to put down an undercoat of acrylic paint, typically a degree or two lighter than the final paint which I will be using. This acts as a ground and makes sure that all areas are fully covered. A couple of short videos follow this, and this shows my techniques and methodology using oil paints. It's not original, but it works. The first step is going to be the jacket, which I've undercoated in Vallejo Russian uniform in two very thin layers so it retains the highlighted shadow detail brought out by the priming and undercoat process. You'll see me using are Winsor & Newton's Artisan range, which are water mixable. They have the traditional qualities of oil paints, but the brushes clean up and the paint thins in water. This helps to keep the smell of solvents out of the painting room. Before we do that, I'm going to put some on my trial spoon just to make sure that the blending is working okay. The paint itself has been made up of a mixture of cadmium yellow hue, ultramarine blue with a tiny bit of raw umber, and it's given us this nice browny green colour. I'm going to put some on the spoon here just to give it a go. I'm going to put a very light application on. The paint hasn't been thinned at all. It's just it is out of the tube and mixed, but it's a very nice creamy consistency. Now, already this is going on a tiny bit thick, so what we're going to do is just scrub it on to make sure that it's covered. And then with a dry, clean brush, I'm going to take most of that off. When the paint begins to build up on your brush that you're taking it off, a quick squeeze through with a tissue or a cloth, and again we go on just smoothing it out until there's only a very light film of paint left. Again, remove the paint, one last go. And that's now ready for the next stages, which will be shading, highlighting, etc. Now we could leave that for half an hour just to set up a little bit. But one of the good things about oil paints is that they remain workable for a long time, for days even. I could come back to that tomorrow and still have a good degree of ability to blend. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to illustrate straight away about how we do some highlighting and shading. Here I'm going to take some of the yellow hue, and we're going to pretend here that this is going to be a highlight area with a teardrop. So starting at the top, just lightly dot our yellow paint in the rough shape that we want. Not adding very much paint at all. And then with another clean dry brush, we're going to just gently stipple that Now the risk is that you stipple or you try and blend too much, and then all you've got then is the original paint. So it's knowing when to stop. So we can see a highlight area forming, and we can just blend the edges just gently to and fro, just where it meets, the lighter paint is meeting the darker paint, and that begins to blend that in and to make it look as if it's one piece. I've now added some white to my palette, and just in that area where we've added the yellow, I'm going to add a few dots of white just towards the top there. And again with our stippling brush, making sure there's no paint remaining from the last one, I'm going to just stipple that into the yellow. And we see a very nice highlight area appearing with the yellow surrounding it. I hope the camera's picking that up. We're going to introduce a bit of shadow, so we're going to take the darker original paint from our mix, which is this ultramarine blue, and with our shadow area forming down here, just a few dots. Which is a very strong blue, so I've got to be careful not to overdo it. And stipple that in. Clean off the brush because that's building up a bit too much. Making sure that there's no hard edges. Just going around the boundaries a bit with the brush, just lightly to and fro to blend that in. And then in the middle of that, again, make sure this blue is off my brush. Some of the raw umber. I like to use colours rather than pure black and white, so adding colour first and then the darker elements, because this helps to add interest, I think, to the final colour. Just gently stippling that. And then round the edges, brush that out a bit until we've got a nice transition from the original colour to the darkest area. And I do hope the camera's picked that up. Now I'm going to apply paint to the model. This is always a bit nerve-wracking. I just want these very thin layers. Stop when there's a bit of paint down. Scrub that brush off, and then start to make sure that it's the thinnest possible layer. That's beginning to look nice. I don't think you want to watch me do that for all the model. So I'm going to turn the camera off, get the paint down, and I'll see you later. Well, all the paint is now on the figure. On the left you can see the figure with its undercoat of Russian uniform, and on the right with its thin layer of oil paint. This has brought this video up to over 10 minutes long, and I think that's long enough for me rambling on, droning on and on about my figure. Part 2 will follow shortly, in which we'll see the figure getting highlights and shadows. Thank you. That's it for now. Come back soon for more riveting figure painting and model building action. Goodbye.